Hey, welcome back.
Hi, welcome. I'm Shenelle.
And I'm Gennelle.
And this is
Shenelle and Gennelle, where book talk meets culture.
And we have a book for you today.
Yeah, one that I love a lot. It's probably on my one that's on my like top favorites.
Oh, really?
At least for therapy, for speech therapy.
Yeah. So the book that we have is called Blended.
Yes, it's called Blended. Now, this story is about a young girl. She's in the 6th grade who is navigating the journeys of being in middle school. What makes the story even more unique is that how she is mixed. Her dad is black and her mom is white. And she feels the tension between being a mixed child. But even to add more to that, her parents are divorced.
Yeah.
And she's currently going back and forth between houses because of custody.
Yeah, so the court decided that she's going to split her time between her mom and her dad. So she spends a week at her mom's house and a week at her dad's house.
Okay.
So she navigates through that and, play out her life. Yeah. So this book has a lot that I like about it. First of all,
what's your favorite part?
There's many favorite parts. And we don't want to give it away because when I tell you that this book is so good, that we don't want to give you too much of the plot because stuff are gonna happen. You're gonna be like, what?
Okay. So just to say, I just have to say this about this book. If you're an adult even though this is a middle school grade book, if you're an adult and that's not into reading,
yes,
try this book.
Yes,
try it.
So don't let the pink and white color fool you to think, oh, this is gonna be like a little cute girl's book, because I don't think so.
No.
So one thing I have to say, I like this book because I used it in therapy.
Yeah.
With my students. Because I am a speech therapist, and the thing that I liked about the book is, the chapters. So when we get later into the ACE, before I can actually leave it for that point. But let's just talk some more about the plot without giving it away.
Okay.
So I think I want to talk about the character dynamics because I think in this story, and I think also like what this did for me was it gave me a window in which to see the character's point of view.
Yes.
Like I am not a product of a biracial relationship or a child, right?
Right.
So the
mixed.
things and topics that come in this book, I have never thought about. I was kind of like...
It did open my eyes to that too, of what it meant to be like mixed, at least in America. And I've never had that experience. Like, I've never thought about it. It never crossed my mind because I'm not mixed. So I never thought, what does it be like to be a mixed child and living in that dynamics?
Yeah.
And I think in movies, I see it where they're like, oh, you're not black enough or you're not white enough. But this book does something very different. It's not about her being black enough or white enough.
Yeah.
It's just her finding that identity between like, there's this concept, there's this idea that her parents would never know how she feels because one is they're white and they're black and it's clear. But for her, she's trying to figure out like how does the world see her? How does she see herself? How does others perceive her as white or black? And even though it's not, the whole book is not about her race in that sense, at least the way I read it, it's more about a young girl going through, and she can't avoid that. And I feel like, how interesting, because even like being black, I can't avoid myself being a black woman. Like that's part of my experience. But for her, like, how does she incorporate that aspect of being mixed? Like, when she's with her mom, who's white, how do people perceive her? She talks about like these different looks that people like, oh, is that her kid? Versus like when she's with her dad, she doesn't get the same look, but then how do people perceive her as being like a lighter skinned, a black person? Like, it was just like dynamics I've never sat and thought about because I just have the privilege not to.
Exactly.
Like, and
that's a good point that you bring up. I think when we talk about privilege, it always looks at like white privilege. I'm like, it's making me think about when you think about privilege in like multi-ethnicity, like I have the privilege of everyone knowing that I'm black.
Right.
Some people might question it like, oh, you might be mixed or something, but that's a privilege that I have. And it might not look like that, right? Because we don't really consider people having like privilege to that degree. Right. But I'm thinking like I never had to go to the dynamics of people, oh, well, they're only going to, put you like, categorize you or put you in like, oh,
box,
you're black or you're white.
Yeah, or constantly asking you
What are you
or where you're from. I never really thought about how that could be not only offensive depending on how the person feels about it, but how it could also cause a conflict in someone's mind if someone keeps asking them, where are you from? Oh, are you from, this place? And constantly trying to guess when you're struggling to identify with a particular ethnicity.
Yeah.
So I think that was eye-opening to me.
Yeah.
I think what kids loved about the book when I used it for therapy is that it was written from her point of view. And I think a lot of times when adults, we make decisions for kids without them having any perspective or any insight. And in this, the character Izzy, or Isabella, you hear a lot of her thoughts. You see a lot, it made me think about that. Kids who have to go through these custody battles with their parents and shared custody, we make the decisions for the kids and we just expect kids to adapt to it. And I think when I was reading this to my students, not that everyone had this story, I think to some degree as she was speaking they could relate immediately. With it.
There's a lot of connected points to this. So I think let's go on to the point of ace, right? Yeah. So is this book aced? Well, when it comes to accessibility, why this book was key for me choosing it after I read it, it was amazing. But why I also thought that it was even appropriate for me to do it for therapy, because as a speech therapist, typically we have 30-minute sessions. And if you're reading a book of this length, which is chapter book, you need something that you can get through. The chapters are really short. Sometimes they're 1, 2 to 3 pages. So that's one thing that I really love. 2, the chapters are labeled Mom's Week, Dad's Week, which help the students keep things in perspective. Her world looks differently depending on whose house she's at. So if she's at Dad's house, the perspective of how she perceives and what's happening is in one aspect of it, and then if she's at Mom's house, there's something totally different.
I would also add that the reading level, even though this book is a chapter book and the cover may look a little young and girly, but this is a good book in terms of kids who are struggling readers, who are older, middle school, even high school. I think somebody could walk around with this book and not feel ashamed. And I think a lot of times when we have kids who are struggling readers and they may be reading at a lower level, you don't want to hand them a picture book. And I feel like this book is at a level where you can hand someone, I feel like it's almost like a third grade read for an average reader, third grade reader for an average reader. So someone who is struggling with this might be an appropriate book for them.
But also the content, I feel, is for a higher grade. I won't say second grade might be too young, even though they may be able to read it. The content is really, really goes into really deeper level conversations. This is a lot of engagement with conversations, a lot of topics and issues that came up. So when it comes to accessibility, I would say yes. Cultural relevance. So that was interesting. We just touched on that before. Because she is mixed, you do have the culture of both. Her being black, but also her white side and what the culture looks like to her from that perspective. So I think it is culturally relevant to her, the character in itself. But the book also touches on a lot of social issues as being a black person and in America. And also how that's viewed. And like we said, with her being mixed, that identity of how do people view her? How does society see her? I think and who makes the ultimate decision? I think when I was going through the book, as she's struggling to figure out who she is and who she wants to identify with or what she is who makes that decision for her? And I think they reveal that to the end of the book. What society believes she is. So I think it's really good, and it shows. I think it gives kids the opportunity to see something from someone else's point of view. Either way, if they're black or they're white students, you can definitely get someone else's perspective on this. So cultural relevance with relating to family dynamics, parental, dynamics, social, racial issues. I think this is all identity. This is all relevant. And engagement.
It's definitely engaging. I was reading this book. I couldn't even put it down. I was just First of all, it's from a kid's perspective, and it's like the audacity of like, not audacity like in a way like, oh my gosh, how dare she say this, but eye-opening. That's the word I should use. It was eye-opening to hear and see from a kid's perspective. And I'm like, I had to keep checking, like an adult wrote this book, right? Because I was just like, this is just so much of how kids probably feel and think. It was just beautifully written that way.
Yeah. And I also think it's engaging because it's fast-paced. It's very fast-paced. The author, she really kept authentic to the language and the lingo of the kids, so it didn't feel forced. Like, I had to double check. I'm like, wait, is this author in her 20s?
I know,
and she's not. So it's just like
Yes.
it's really like I like that. Like, it kept it fast paced. The kids were laughing, they were engaged, and then parts got a little more serious. We sat down and we talked about it.
Yeah.
We took our time through it. So it's honestly, it took us almost the entire year to get through this book, not because I think they couldn't read it faster, but we had to stop it and talk about a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would definitely go back to this book again and again and again. We bought 9 copies of this book.
Yeah.
Listen.
Yeah, and the kids actually told their parents, and they started reading ahead. So, imagine kids that are having speech therapy that don't enjoy reading, got their parents to get this book for them because they wanted to read ahead because we were moving too slow in speech.
Yeah.
Like, they were that much engaged in this book.
So much so.
Yeah.
Even have students this year who came back was rereading the same story that we read last year.
Yes.
So, definitely, long story short, this book
Blended,
is aced.
Till next time, guys.
Bye.
Bye.